The Pope himself has admitted that the moral authority of the Church in Ireland has been damaged. In his pastoral letter last month, he told Irish bishops they'd lost effectiveness because of the way they'd handled sex abuse. But criticism from outside was too much. Rowan Williams had spoken of a colossal trauma engulfing the Church and the people it serves.
An institution so deeply bound in to the life of the society, suddenly losing all credibility. And that's not just a problem for the Church, it is a problem for everybody in Ireland.
But they were words Dr. Williams quickly regretted. This evening he phoned the Catholic Archbishop of Dublin, Diarmuid, to apologise. It was not quite a retraction, but Dr. Williams spoke of his deep sorrow and regret for difficulties which may have been created by remarks concerning the credibility of the Catholic Church in Ireland. He added that he had not intended to cause any offence. Archbishop Martin was just part of a chorus of criticism of Dr. Williams from Ireland. Even the leader of the Anglican Church there joined Catholic colleagues in regret at his words. Archbishop Martin was scathing, saying he'd rarely felt so discouraged.
A major church leader has to be more careful about the things he says. Obviously the Church in Ireland has lost credibility, but it's very damaging to those who are trying to restore credibility to be simply wiped off with a general comment like that.
Archbishop Martin said this evening he'd spoken to Rowan Williams, but rather pointedly thanked only Anglicans in Ireland for their support.
If the Archbishop of Canterbury had said that the credibility of the Catholic Church was damaged, I've said that on many occasions, but to say that the Catholic Church in Ireland has lost all credibility, and to hear that booming out on the BBC World Service to every corner of the world, I was stunned. I was also discouraged, not for myself, but I've been out in the last 10 days in almost 2 parishes a day, and I know the effort that's being put in, particularly by priests to renew the Church, by parents to transmit the faith to their children, and by the Catholic community to change around. There's not, and I said that the other day, we cannot put the past aside. We can't put it asleep. We have to recognise the damage that was done to people who were abused, and that was made more difficult by the way the Church managed and covered up these things. But I think I really felt, I felt that those people were putting so much effort into renewing the Church, to move away to a more gospel-led church, to a less arrogant church, to have all of them lumped in together into a Catholic Church in Ireland which has lost all credibility. I think that's damaging.
So it's the sweeping nature of the statement, is it? Do you think it's tarnishing those who are really doing their best?
It would be very hard to say to somebody, lost all credibility, and to think that that meant anything else but what it says. It's a very sweeping statement, lost all credibility, and the only evidence that he produces for it are comments that he's received from a friend of his in Ireland. A major church leader has to be more careful about the things he says. Obviously the Church in Ireland has lost credibility, but it's very damaging to those who are trying to restore credibility to be simply wiped off with a general comment like that. And as I say, I rarely felt so discouraged as I felt this morning when I hear that being said, not just in an interview, but it's being sent out around the world as just that, nothing else is being said about it.
Thank you. Sex abuse is likely still to be an inflammatory issue when Pope Benedict visits Britain in September. Today we got a glimpse of Rowan Williams' view of how the scandal has affected the Catholic Church, at least in Ireland. That could make his meeting with the Pope an awkward one. Robert Piggott, BBC News.
Good evening, Rowan. It's the 18th of April 2016 and it's just after midnight. And obviously I'm making you my usual video after the weekend to let you know that I haven't been seducing any priests over the weekend. And actually, I wasn't planning to seduce any priests over the weekend anyway, but even if I had been, I would have not done it because I know how furious it makes you. And there's nothing you can do about it. I'm in charge and you can't do a thing. So, without further ado, I thought I'd go on to make some more comments about the truly weird lecture you gave at St Mary le Strand on the 5th of April. So here we go. So you go on to say, so, an expectation to do with taking seriously with the windows in the depths. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. An expectation around capacity to speak for, and more importantly, to listen to the voices, otherwise silenced or absent. Well, you're following on here from what I commented on previously, where you were talking about involving women in the House of Bishops and so on, and trying to make out you were speaking on behalf of marginalised people, but in fact you just go around marginalising people as much as you can and promoting incompetent, abusive people. This is because you feel threatened by competent people, as well you should, because you're completely useless, and also because you're really on a path to be destroying everything, Western civilization, Christianity, anything that comes into your path you are trying to destroy. So this is why you're behaving this way. So, as I've said before, you can talk all you want about listening to silenced voices, but actually you silence voices, as I've said many times. So you're saying the opposite of what you're doing, as usual. So you go on to say, but I mentioned also in my introductory remarks the question which I expressed as, how are we mended? How are we mended? Put more positively, what's the positive vision of the human good that we're working with? So, my question, Rowan, isn't how are we mended, because I was certainly not being mended in the Church of England. In fact, I was just being continuously abused and treated like shit. And you were engineering all of this. So my question is not how am I mended, it's how was I broken in the first place? And it turns out it was you. You were behind it all. You are an abusive, sadistic, satanic, psychopathic, prurient pervert. So I'm not asking the question, how are we mended, Rowan? I'm asking, how was I broken? And until I hear you saying some words of regret for the evil, abusive way that you've treated me and had me treated over the years, then I'm not prepared to discuss any other matter. How are we mended? You just say the opposite of what you're actually doing, don't you? You're not in the business of mending people. You're in the business of breaking people. And I'm not the only person you've done it to either, as I've mentioned many times before. And you'd still be going on doing it now if people hadn't got wise to what a psychopathic sleazeball you are. Put more positively, what's the positive vision of the human good that we're working with? Some of you will remember the book by Robert Edward Skidelsky, What Appeared a Few Years Ago. How Much is Enough? Which argued that our obsession with an entirely external and mechanical measure of economic growth had distracted our attention disastrously from any question of what a good human life looked like. I don't know what all of this has got to do with what you've said before. Like I said in this talk, you're just all over the place. There's no thread going through it, which there often isn't in the ad hoc talks that you give. I just don't know why people ask you to speak to them, because you talk so much crap. It's just unbelievable the amount of crap that you talk. Which I first discovered when I was in Cardiff, actually, because I came to a couple of lectures that you gave there, and they were total rubbish. You didn't say anything at all. Anyway, you're talking here about what a good human life looks like. I've talked about this before as well. You do keep saying the same things over and over again. You know, I talked about this in relation to St John of the Cross's poem, Dark Night, which I've done a video about because you were misquoting it, mistranslating it, misrepresenting St John of the Cross and other people who write and speak about him, and trying to make out that instead of writing poems about God, he was actually talking about sneaking out of the monastery and having illicit affairs. That's what you that's what you were saying effectively, and it was just a complete lie. You want to think that because you want to put yourself in the same category as the greatest saints of the church, and because you can't do that through virtue, you have to bring them down because you can't elevate yourself to their level. You've got no intention of doing that, so you just try and drag everybody down to your level because you've got no intention of improving yourself because you think you're absolutely perfect. So in relation to St John of the Cross's poem Dark Night, I did talk about the theme in 16th century Spanish literature that you find of ser and parecer, ser meaning being in relation to the identity of something, and parecer meaning appearing or seeming. And so I've said before that you can't approach God seeming like something, seeming virtuous, seeming like a Christian, looking like a Christian, looking like a moral person or whatever. You need to be the things rather than pretend to be the things. So you've got everything upside down, Rowan, because all you ever do is pretend and try to appear in a certain way. And this is a prime example of this, where you're talking about mending people, but the whole mission of your life is going around and breaking people. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. So you go on to say, what does a life well lived actually look like? Well, it's quite hard to say really, isn't it? Because there isn't one model of a life well lived, because we're all individuals, we all have different states of life, different occupations, different vocations, different personalities. So there isn't really one template that you could say this is a good life or a life well lived or anything like that. And actually in the Catholic Church, you know, we've got a lot of saints, we can read about them, read the things that they wrote, and so we can look at a whole variety of people and see how they lived out their vocation and developed a virtue and so on. So we don't need to be reinventing the wheel right now. You're just trying to stir up the waters, aren't you? Muddy the waters, cause confusion, as if we haven't already solved this problem, as if we haven't got Moses and the prophets and Jesus and St Paul and all the other saints that have come after that, as if, you know, we're just starting with a blank piece of paper now and we have to figure it all out. And this just isn't true, you know, we don't have to be in this chaotic, uncertain way with no boundaries, which is always the environment that you're trying to create, chaos and lack of boundaries, and like we haven't even figured out the slightest thing yet, when actually, as I've said before, Christianity is a revealed religion. It's revealed in sacred texts and in tradition, and so we don't have to be reinventing the wheel every minute of every day, which is what you seem to be doing, mainly to try and break down everything that's gone before so you can direct us all off in a globalist direction. And also because you just like destroying good things, because that's the kind of person that you are. We need models, we need narratives of that. We need, in the jargon, a hagiology. That is, we need a science of good lives, holy lives, mended lives. We need to be able to say, this is what we think a human life looks like when it's working at full stretch. I don't really know what working at full stretch is supposed to mean. I dread to think, to be honest. But I've just explained all of that we've already got it, Rowan. We don't need to develop it. I mean, these things are developing, obviously, because more people are being born and living and so on. But we've got it already. We don't need to invent it as a new thing today. And you're talking about human life, and you go on to say, when it's fulfilling what it's capable of, not a shiny, polished Superman or Superwoman ideal, but a mended life, a life that has coped with the fractures and the failures of actual human existence and yet not closed itself up. So you're talking about me here, I think, and I think you might be talking about you as well. But I'll answer this in relation to me first, and then I'll answer it in relation to you. A life that has coped with the fractures and the failures of actual human existence. Well, the fractures and failures of my adult life, almost every last one of them, have been engineered by you, Rowan. So it wasn't just life that happened to me. I wasn't just living an ordinary life and some unfortunate things happened to me. You engineered nearly all of them as a means of breaking me, bringing me down, eliminating me as competition for you, and stopping me blowing the whistle on you to try and discredit me to other people, which I've said many times before. So you're talking here about someone who's coped with the fractures and failures of actual human existence and yet not closed itself up. The person, you mean. Well, which part of me do you want open then, Rowan, if you don't want me closed up? You see, it's always going in the same direction, isn't it? This is what I keep saying, you keep going round and round in the same circles. You just don't get it, Rowan. I said no. There's nothing you can do about it. And also, you know, you can spout as much bullshit as you want about how I'm somehow inadequate because I've closed myself up from you and so on. Well, too bad. You should have thought of all of that while you were going around treating me like shit, shouldn't you? What planet are you on? Why on earth would I trust a psychopathic slime ball like you, who never does anything but lie? You're not a full shilling, are you, if you think you can manipulate me with this bullshit? You're just unbelievable. I'll say a bit more about that later. So you say, a life that goes on perhaps mysteriously being an agent of hope or of mending in its environment, for all its own flaws and fractures. Well, I don't know if you're talking about you here, but you don't go on being an agent of hope or of mending, do you? You're an agent of despair and wounding. So if it's you that you're talking about, that's not true. And also, if I was to be going on, perhaps mysteriously, being an agent of hope or of mending in my own environment, well, that wouldn't mean involving myself with you, would it? Because I'm in my own environment and I'm not having anything to do with you. So there you go. So you go on to say, when people ask, so how do you begin to communicate the faith? And this is what you say. My answer tends to be, well, let me tell you about X, Y and Z. Let me tell you what a life might look like that has some claim to be mended. Not perfect, not polished, not flawless or sinless, but mended, managing and therefore being a vehicle for something hopeful, communicating possible meaning. Well, I don't know what faith you're talking about here, but let's assume, this is an insane assumption, but let's assume you're talking about the Christian faith. So let me tell you how you can communicate the Christian faith. What you can say is, well, despite the fact that I did all these truly wicked and evil things in my past to other people and lied about events that took place in world history that's led to 1 million deaths in the world, despite all of that, I turned to Christ and repented of my sins and he forgave me, and now I'm a forgiven person, I'm a new person. And even though I was so wicked and I don't deserve it, Christ has forgiven me, he's paid the price for my sins on the cross, and so I can inherit eternal life because Christ has forgiven me. So that's how you could witness to the faith, isn't it? That's how you could communicate the faith, the Christian faith. But that's hardly what you're doing, is it? You're just threatening to murder people and trying to control them and talking complete satanic bullshit. So, moving on. Of course, not everybody signs up for that. If you tell the story of some great life of faith, somebody may very well say, well, that's very impressive, but I don't know that I believe what they believe. And that's fine, but it's the beginning of a conversation. I can't even be bothered to comment on that. Who wants a conversation with you? You talk nothing but crap. So, if that is what amended life might look like, let's think about how that is reproducible, intelligible, how it can be thought through, worked for in our environment, locally, nationally, and globally. You're just waffling on to filling time here, aren't you? How are we mended? How do we move from the failure or the flaw towards some kind of humanity that is not completely paralysed by resentment, by fear, by the urge to control, by the terror of the other and the stranger? Well, you're trying to insult me, aren't you, here? But I'm not paralysed by resentment. You're a very resentful person. You're paralysed by fear because when you saw me, well, once you went white and then nearly collapsed, and one time you ran off. I'm not paralysed by resentment at all, or fear, or the urge to control. I just want everybody, including you, to piss off and leave me alone, because I'm sick of having my life invaded by swarms of idiots using mind control techniques on me. I'm absolutely sick to death of everybody harassing me, which has been going on now for 7 years. All of this has occurred because of you. I'm still being sexually abused by remote weapons. I've had 15% of my life poured down the drain, and I'm absolutely sick of it. I don't believe any of the bullshit anyway, so I don't know why anybody bothers. So I just want everybody to piss off, quite frankly, including you. And you can say what you like about it. You can call that paralysed by resentment, by fear, by the urge to control, by terror of the other and the stranger. You can call it what you like. I don't give a damn. I'm not having anything to do with you, Rowan. Piss off and stop talking shit. So I'll play this clip now and then I'll comment on one or two other things that you say.
So, an expectation to do with taking seriously, with the windows into the depths. An expectation around the capacity to speak for and, more importantly perhaps, to listen to voices otherwise silenced or absent. But I mentioned also in my introductory remarks the question which I expressed as, how are we mended? Put more positively, what's the positive vision of the human good that we are working with? Some of you will remember the book by Robert and Edward Skidelsky that appeared a few years ago, How Much Is Enough?, which argued that our obsession with an entirely external and mechanical measure of economic growth had distracted our attention disastrously from any question of what a good human life looked like. What does a life well lived actually look like? We need models, we need narratives of that. We need, in the jargon, a hagiology. That is, we need a science of good lives, holy lives, mended lives. We need to be able to say, this is what we think a human life looks like. when it's working at full stretch, when it's fulfilling what it's capable of. Not a shiny, polished Superman or Superwoman ideal, but a mended life, a life that has coped with the fractures and the failures of actual human existence, and yet not closed itself up. A life that goes on, perhaps mysteriously, being an agent of hope or of mending in its environment, for all its own flaws and fractures. So I think we need good stories. Again, to repeat something I've said many times, when people ask, so how do you begin to communicate the faith? My answer tends to be, well, let me tell you about X, Y, and Z. Let me tell you what a life might look like that has some claim to be mended. Not perfect, not polished, not flawless or sinless, but mended, managing, and therefore being a vehicle for something hopeful, communicating possible meaning. But of course not everybody, so to speak, signs up for that. If you tell the story of some great life of faith, somebody may very well say, well, that's very impressive, but I don't know that I believe what they believe. And that's fine. But it's the beginning of a conversation. Just the kind of conversation, I think, that, Philip, you want to encourage. So if that is what a mended life might look like, let's think about how that is reproducible, intelligible, how it can be thought through, worked for in our environment, locally, nationally, globally. How are we mended? How do we move from the failure and the flaw towards some kind of humanity that is not completely paralyzed by resentment, by fear, by the urge to control, by the terror of the other, the stranger?
So you go on to say, if we're talking about faith in the public square, those are some of the things that we, and I'm speaking obviously as a priest and a bishop here. I'll comment on that later on. You're not going to be a priest and a bishop for long anyway, are you? You're going to be an inmate. We in the church need to be reflecting on. These are the issues I've been talking about before and that you've just said. And we need, therefore, to be uncomfortably aware of the various ways in which our structures and our habits as church get in the way of that. You emphasise habits there. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of that is. A habit is a garment that a monk or a nun wears. I don't know if that's got anything to do with it, but you emphasise this word. I've got no idea why, and I don't really care. We give off the message that we are most deeply preoccupied with what we're against. You're quite emphatic about this. I've already covered this, haven't I? You're talking about me here. Yes, I'm against psychopaths and scumbags who have gone round systematically destroying my life, who lie their faces off everywhere, have led to 1 million deaths with the propaganda that they've given off, broadcasting bullshit on national television, as I've demonstrated many times, and all the lies that you've told. And I'm quite sure that there's hardly anyone on the entire planet who would disagree with me that it's a good thing to be against these things. I think that the majority of human beings on planet Earth agree with me that destroying people's lives, trying to screw people who don't want anything to do with you, and lying about events which then go on to lead to the deaths of millions of people and the enslavement of everybody. Virtually everyone on the planet would agree with that, Rowan. So you're the only one who doesn't like me being against these things and repeatedly saying them. And that's because it's not in your interest to have me here repeatedly pointing out what a psychopathic scumbag you are. So just don't even bother trying to manipulate me, because I couldn't care less what you think or say about anything. We give off the message, subliminally perhaps, sometimes, that we would really like to be in charge because we know best. We give off the message that the mended or holy life is some kind of unattainable, timeless, flawless perfection. Well, I'm not giving off any message subliminally. I am in charge, Rowan. I am in charge of my relationship with you, in that I'm not having one. I am in charge. So don't argue back with me or try any manipulative strategies. I'm not your mother. I'm not giving you what you want. You'll be going on the naughty step in a minute, probably when I come and arrest you. And I am particularly in charge of my vagina, and neither you nor anyone else is getting your filthy little perverted hands on it. That goes for you and your pretend astrophysical clergy friend who you were controlling to sexually harass me and incite other people to treat me in an abusive way. So I am in charge of my relationship with you. I'm not having one. And also with any of your other perverted people you've had bothering me, and people bothering me in other ways. And I'm particularly in charge of my vagina. It's mine, and I'm keeping it, and you're not having it. I am in charge. And we need again and again to be brought down to earth. We ourselves, of course, become complicit in silencing various kinds of voices, having talked about people of other races, people of other sexual orientation than the majority, about children and about women. Well, you're not complicit in silencing various kinds of voices, are you, Rowan? You're not complicit. You're the agent behind it all. Other people have been complicit. You were the one engineering it all. So don't try blaming it on other people like you did before, when you gave a lecture at the British Academy, where you basically said that your intentions are very pure intentions, and the only reason that any of your very pure intentions go wrong is because we're living in a fallen, sinful world, and other people are sinful. You, of course, being absolutely perfect. Right, well, I had a slight technical hitch there in that the memory filled up on my phone, so I had to upload my videos so I could carry on videoing. These are the technical hitches you see you have to deal with when you've only got an improvised TV studio. So, I shall carry on now without further ado to comment a little bit further on things that you said. So you go on to say, then again, we have to face the fact that as a matter of bare history, the Church has very often been complicit in all those ways. So you're talking about excluding and marginalising people who belong to various groups in society, like different races, people with different sexual orientation to the majority, and children and women. Well, this is a strategy of cultural Marxism, isn't it, to break down society into different groups of people, to fragment it, and then to kind of make out that the minority groups, or the marginalised groups, or the people who may be treated in a less well way, at least some of the time, than other people, and to use these groups to attack the majority, to attack the whole of society. People within these groups may well have legitimate grievances, but the tool of cultural Marxists like yourself is to harness the grievances of various minority groups or oppressed groups in order to attack the majority, not to be of benefit to the minority or the marginalised group, but rather to bring down the society as a whole. And cultural Marxism was developed at the Frankfurt School because Marxism as an economic theory was a complete failure straight away. So Marxist ideology was married to the culture, and it is now interpreted in a cultural way. So you talking about different groups in society being treated in a bad way This is actually cultural Marxism. Political correctness is another way of talking about it. And as I've said, I think already, this is virtue signalling, but you don't in fact have any virtue, because you talk about these different groups of people as if they need some kind of special care or something. But when you actually encounter individuals from among these people, then you treat them in a particularly abusive way. So you say that you're helping them and liberating them, but in fact you're doing quite the opposite. You're always doing the opposite of what you say you're doing. This is because you're an extreme narcissist. So you pretend to be helping people and soothing them and so on, but the reality of it is that you're stabbing them in the back. And what you did to me is a prime example, because you always told me to my face that you were supporting me, but actually you were stabbing me in the back absolutely everywhere I went. So in whatever you say, you're always doing the opposite of what you say. It's a kind of smokescreen that you throw out, criticising people for being prurient and stuff like that, when it's you that's prurient. It's not projection. It's not projection. That would imply that it was unconscious. You're doing it consciously and deliberately. Then again, we have to face the fact that as a matter of bare history, the Church has very often been complicit in all those ways. Well, the Church is a collective, really, isn't it? So the Church hasn't really done anything. Individuals within the Church may have acted in certain bad ways, but the Church as a collective hasn't done anything. This is your collectivist ideology, and you talking about the Church behaving in abusive ways towards women or people of different races and so on. This is a way of diverting attention from your own individual abusive behaviour, which you refuse to accept responsibility for. You blame your victims and threaten your victims and try and coerce and manipulate your victims, because the only thing that's important in the entire universe is that you get what you want. Everything revolves around you. So you're talking about the Church behaving in an abusive way to divert attention from the fact that you are in fact an abusive person within the Church of England. So if the Church is abusive, then you're one of the biggest reasons for it. And you say, and I say that not to load the Church with unmanageable levels of guilt. Well, you're not loading me with any guilt, because I haven't abused anybody, Rowan. You're the abuser and I'm the victim. You're the one with the guilt, and you just won't accept it. You're constantly trying to put it on your victims and divert it in other directions and make out that it's all the fault of the world being bad or other people being sinful, and you're just completely perfect, and everything you do is purely intentioned. You're a precious little innocent snowflake, and you never do anything wrong, and other people are just big bullies and horrible to you because they don't like being abused by you, and they won't give you what you want, particularly me. So you say this not to laden the Church with unmanageable levels of guilt, but just as a basic requirement of truthfulness and realism. That is so funny. Truthfulness and realism. The truthfulness and realism needs to be about you, Rowan. The Church of England would probably be about 40% less abusive, I'd say, if you weren't in it, or if you'd acknowledge your evil behaviour and change the way you act and change your attitude. We don't have a lot in the bank in terms of credibility with a lot of people, and we just need to bear that in mind. Well, you're the reason, Rowan, because you're not credible. You just talk nothing but crap all the time. You make things up. It's easy to demonstrate that you make things up when you lie about what the Bible says and say the opposite. And you did the same thing about Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. You lied about 9/11 and that was easy to demonstrate. You just lie about everything. So it's quite hilarious to hear you say that talking in this way is a basic requirement of truthfulness and realism, because you're just trying to divert attention away from your personal wicked, evil, abusive behaviour. So you don't have any credibility with anybody, I don't think. You certainly haven't got any credibility with me. So you go on to say, and coming up out of all that, how do we convey that we can be trusted? And you emphasise trusted. That we can be trusted, you say it again and emphasise it, with people's most awkward and sensitive and uncomfortable spiritual aspirations or searchings. Well, you can't be trusted, Rowan. You can use all the techniques of neuro-linguistic programming, diversionary techniques, obfuscation, blatant lying, everything you want. Use all the strategies that you want. The simple fact is, you cannot be trusted. You cannot be trusted. You're a deeply disturbed, abusive, wicked man. And there's no diverting that by blaming some collective that you happen to belong to. And the only reason that you belong to it is because they never throw anyone out. How do we convey that we can be trusted with all of that? We are indeed a hospitable space in that sense. Oh, a hospitable space. That wouldn't be anything to do with pretend astrophysicists, would it? No, you're not a hospitable space. How many years did you have to be hospitable to me? Well, you met me in 1992 and I left the Church of England in 2007, so that's 15 years you had to be hospitable and kind and empathic and behave in a virtuous way and tell the truth and support me and not lie about me everywhere. So you had 15 years. 15 years. That's 10 years plus 5 years. That's quite a lot of years. That's nearly a third of my life, as it is now. That's nearly a third of my life. You had to be kind and hospitable to me and all these virtuous things, and you didn't do any of those things, so I'm afraid you've made your bed, you can lie in it. I don't have any quick fixes there, but it is the question I want to keep somewhere in the conversation about all of this. You're just talking crap and obfuscating, Rowan, and trying to squirm out of the situation that you're in. You refuse to face the fact that you're a truly wicked man. Anyway, I'll leave it there for tonight, otherwise it'll be about Wednesday before I've uploaded all these videos and edited them and so on. So I'll leave it there for now, but don't forget, be alert. Hasta la próxima.
Now, if we're talking about faith in the public square, those are some of the things which I believe we, I'm speaking as a priest and bishop, obviously here, if we're talking about faith in the public square, those are some of the things which I believe we, I'm speaking as a priest and bishop, obviously here, we within the church need to be reflecting on. And we need, therefore, to be uncomfortably aware of the various ways in which our structures and our habits as church get in the way of that. I've already indicated some of them. We give off the message that we are most deeply preoccupied with what we're against. We give off the message, perhaps subliminally sometimes, that what we would really like is to be in charge because we know best. We give off the message that the mended or the holy life is some kind of unattainable, timeless, flawless perfection. And we need, again and again, to be brought down to earth. We ourselves, of course, become complicit in silencing various kinds of voices. Having talked about people of other races, people of other sexual orientation from the majority, about children or about women, then again we have to face the fact that as a matter of bare history, the church has very often been complicit in all those ways. And I say that not to load the church with unmanageable levels of guilt, but just as a basic requirement of truthfulness and realism. We don't have a lot in the bank in terms of credibility with a lot of people, and we just need to bear that in mind. And coming up out of all of that is, I think, the very, again, a simple, basic question. How do we convey that we can be trusted, with people's most awkward and sensitive and uncomfortable spiritual aspirations or searchings? How do we convey that we can be trusted with all that we are indeed a hospitable space in that sense? I don't, I hasten to add, have any quick fixes there, but it's the question I want to keep somewhere in the conversation about all this.